reminisce. Yeah. I reminisce for a spell, or shall I say think back 22 years ago to keep it on track. The birth of a child on the 8th of October. A toast, but my granddaddy came sober. Count all the fingers and the toes. Now I suppose you hope the little black boy grows.
Hello, Purple Raiders, and welcome back to the Reload Podcast. This is our third episode. I'm one of your hosts, Riley Sullivan. Along with me is
Davis Robey.
And this week, we decided to bring on a guest. He's a familiar voice of Mount Union this year.
Billy Beebee, guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course.
So, as we all know, we like to talk D3 football here, Mount Union football, around the OAC, around the country. It's what we do, so let's get right into it. We missed 2 games since the last time we had an episode. This past week, Mount Union took on Otterbein, but the week before was probably the biggest matchup of the season. Number 2, Mount Union took on then number 9, John Carroll. Billy, you were at the game.
Well, we
How
thought
was
it was the biggest matchup of the season.
It wasn't very competitive whatsoever.
It was not nearly as close as I think anyone expected it to be. Billy, you were at the game. What did you see from Mount Union that you liked? What did you see from John Carroll that you liked or didn't like?
Yeah, guys, first off, again, thanks for having me on. Proud of you guys doing this every week. They're really, personally, you don't get anything out of it, but I think, you know, as guys trying to grow in this, you're doing a good job. You're my 13th favorite podcast to listen to, so just kidding.
Hey, that's how many national championships we have, so
There
I
you
take
go.
that as a very big compliment.
There you go. You know, it's such an interesting game because I was telling some of the younger guys before pregame, I said, guys, get ready because it's always a competitive game. I've never not watched a competitive game. John Carroll gives it their best. It was just clear offensively they didn't have it. John Carroll was not ready. It's weird because they're in a rebuilding year on a whole side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
How weird is that? But yet they're nationally ranked because of how good their defense is. And I described it to the color man, Will Brienza. I said, they're making the plays we thought we predicted they would make on defense, but they're making them every third play.
Mm-hmm.
So the Raiders strike on the first 2, and the third play they make it, and it's not enough to stop them. And this was the defense that I really thought was, man, this will give us fits, this will be trouble. We scored on the first 4 drives. We recovered a punt on them. They didn't put up any points. They've scored 14, but I don't remember them scoring those points.
Yeah, they were big plays, like one big play in the third quarter, I think, and then one big
Sure.
play in the fourth.
Yeah, when we all had our backups in.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was mostly garbage time by the time that they actually put points on the board, which is not what you're looking for any football team, really.
And the other interesting storyline that developed over the game, guys, you know, you got so much going on, rosters, you're still trying to learn new players. You don't take notice of this. Their senior running back, Michael Canganelli, a rushing leader in years past, we got him broken down. We're ready for him. He's only returning kicks. That's it. And I think they thought if they put a speed runner in, and I at this point I don't remember the name of the running back they tried. He was a sophomore from Cleveland, and he did not do well. He had like 3 carries for 10 yards.
I think Canganelli was one of those players where they finally started to play him in that second
And they
half. He made
switched.
some plays, yeah.
I think they thought they'd throw Mount Union off, going speed instead of power, because Canganelli's huge, no doubt. He's a bulldog, big player. I've seen him for 2 straight years now. He was a great backup to Roe Golphin, who was a good running back for John Carroll. And it's just, we predicted he would take over, and he just... I don't know if it was the game plan or something happened, or they're not rolling that way, or they clearly see they need to change things up on offense.
Didn't he break their single season, like, total all-purpose yards record last year?
It's possible.
I was told that he broke that record, and so to not play someone who is a legitimate record holder against your biggest opponent of the year doesn't really make sense to me. It's a curious coaching call. He could have been hurt or something, and maybe that's why they were stashing him.
Maybe.
Like cramps, whatever, listed as questionable during the week. It was just a really trivial game by John Carroll, and like you said, their offense did not look good.
No.
It looked really bad. I had some of the stats from the quarterback here. Jake Floria did the numbers. He struggled throwing the ball. He averaged only 5.66 yards per attempt.
Sure.
That's not getting the ball downfield at all. If all you're doing is checking down or making these questionable throws, how are you going to be successful?
And he didn't necessarily throw picks either. He didn't,
No.
he didn't loft the ball up. Some of these OAC quarterbacks have just gotten under pressure and hoped their receiver can make a play. Doesn't work like that. He didn't make those decisions. They went for easy screen passes that didn't quite work. And once he ran, he did pretty well scrambling, I thought. But it just looked like he was overwhelmed. He clearly didn't have the arm strength, I thought, to beat some of these DBs, which more and more OAC quarterbacks are realizing that they don't have the arm to throw on Griffin, Bradley, Britt, and whoever's playing safety. The Raiders are playing like 5 safeties right now. But, it was tough, and then they just never got on the board. They put Canganelli back in, trying to grind through it. It's a tough year for them offensively. They're really good on defense.
It is.
They've got all the answers on defense. The Raiders scored on the first drive, which I saw them go 3 straight third downs. Never seen that, I don't think, ever.
Mm-hmm.
They were really pushing them to the limit, and they even forced them to go short on a couple plays, like a 3rd and 8. They went for exactly 9 yards, like no 17-yard. They went right for 9 yards, and they forced a punt the second drive, and I thought, okay, there it is. There's the defense that stops us, and we recover the punt, and it's just nothing from there.
Yeah, they definitely struggled a lot. Davis, is there anything you'd like to add in terms of like their offensive struggles, Mount Union, what you saw on offense, what you saw on defense?
Defensively, obviously, they're very sound, and they know what they're doing on that side of the ball, like Billy said earlier. And offensively, just flat completely. Got no passes off, really. It was more of like a speed option kind of game, kind of just handing the ball off most of the time. And just Jake Floria just really struggled during the game. And I think that's a testament to our defense this year with how we're playing and what we can continue to work on as well.
Now, do you think that John Carroll's offense has a chance to catch up to the defense at some point this year? Is the second spot in the OAC still theirs, or is a team like Baldwin Wallace have that chance? You talked about Baldwin Wallace. You're pretty high on them in the OAC this year. Do you think that Baldwin Wallace has a second spot, or can John Carroll's offense catch up in time for them to take that back?
I think that John Carroll has room to grow on offense. And if I say that they're stagnant, then yeah, they would. But I think they can get better. I think their defense can still win them games. It depends how they want to take it. If they want to take it like, all right, Mount beat us bad, we're in trouble, fine. But if they want to say, hey, we can still get to the playoffs and get, 2 or 3 games, maybe even see Mount Union in one of those games, that's a great season for them. And no doubt they still believe in that. And we talked about it. There's seniors on that team that beat Mount Union still. And it's just clear that how special Anthony Meglin was for them. He had another year of eligibility, but he technically graduated, so he didn't want to use that. It was time to move on. He wasn't even, I don't think, a superior athlete. I think he was just a smart decision maker, got the ball off well, and sure, made some athletic plays, of course, but just I thought he read the field well and made difference for them. So Anthony Meglin definitely missed by that program, but I like John Carroll, but I thought they had the same problems Baldwin Wallace did. There's nothing special about their offense. There has to be something special. And if you want to jump to the Raiders, man, I think this was the first stop on the Justin Hill. Maybe Ghilardi.
Yeah, that. I was going to bring that up later in the show. Do you think that he can win the Gagliardi Trophy? That's like the Heisman of Division III.
Ghilardi.
It's the Ghilardi.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that he can win that as a wide receiver?
I don't think that's in the cards because I think it's a quarterback thing. It just always is. It always ends up in a quarterback's hands, especially D3.
A few running backs every now and then. I looked at a
Sure.
list of past winners, and like you said, a lot of them are quarterbacks, and every once in a while there's a running back thrown in there.
Yeah. But what we did talk about on Raiders on this week, guys, is I've kind of just developed my own thoughts on what it really takes to get to the pros for Mount Union. People just infer these guys just awesome, Raiders, Pierre and Cecil, obviously the big names that got there. But there's a process, they got through things. And I've just talked with alumni over the years, just figuring things out. My inferences in how it goes is you can get 3 things, okay? So you get a rookie minicamp invite.
Mm-hmm.
you get a training camp invite, then you make the team, right? So Pierre and Cecil got through all three of those things.
Pierre actually got drafted.
Yeah, so even better. He probably didn't even have to do the first two. I mean, he probably tended for good measure, but
even last year, like Jared Ruth, rookie minicamp for the Detroit Lions.
Right. So what I'm saying is so Tom Lally and Roman Namdar, who were a year before me, so that'd be 2015, they graduated. They worked through those things and they played preseason games. Roman maybe just did minicamp. Jared, who I think is he was an awesome player here. Justin Hill's better than Jared Ruth. He just has better stats. Yes. He's a better playmaker, bigger size. And Jared...
He has prototypical wide receiver size for the NFL. He does.
So if Jared gets a minicamp invite, what does Justin Hill get? That's what I'm thinking. That's what my head is saying. At least, right? He's got to get the minicamp invite for sure. And people were saying there were scouts at the game. I don't want to get into that too much because nothing inferred, but people said there were scouts at the John Carroll game, and I'm sure they'll be here when ESPN's here and definitely for Stag, but his stats are impressive. Most of his catches are touchdowns more than not.
Yeah, he's got 25 receptions this year and 10 touchdowns.
Yeah.
10 of his 25 catches have gone for touchdowns.
That's almost
it's
a conversion
ridiculous.
rate of 50%.
It's incredible, and we were talking about Saturday, not to jump into the next week, but he broke Pierre's record, and he's coming for Cecil. We think he can break it. He had his longest career touchdown, 82 yards. Guys, he's killing it, and he's not even returning punts, and I thought those were some of his best highlights, was he would return punts right in people's faces and take it back. So
that might be another thing that if he is looked at the next level, they might punt returns, kick returns, that type of thing, because he is that type of athlete.
Sure.
I want to know what his straight line speed is. I figure that the further we progress in this season, like the Stag Bowl semifinals, chances are there probably will be scouts at those games. So if they're looking at him and he's still dominating games at that point of the season, do you think he could get drafted? Do you think he has the talent like the 6th or 7th round? Obviously, he's at a small school, but if you're dominating even at a small school level, we've seen guys from Division III get drafted. It was just a few years ago that Tampa Bay took a guy in the 2nd round from Division III. So
yeah, and I think if you get invited to the combine and you perform very well, there's a very good chance you'll get drafted just based on your 40, broad
even a
jump.
Regional combine.
Yeah. I mean, just any point where a scout's going to look at you and say, we'll give this guy a chance. And if they use a draft pick on you, that's very valuable.
Yeah, Davis is right. Combine's going to be the key. What does he get invited to?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to go too far deep. He's got a long way to go. And
absolutely.
You don't want to create, but there's been guys that were really good that I at first thought, oh, this guy, he'll get a look, but he didn't, whoever it was. But the combine, I think, is key because guys do get invited to these regional combines, and it just doesn't do much for them. I think, maybe it got Jared a tryout, and some guys are still playing overseas. There's still Trey Burke or Kevin Burke, and I believe Therese Scott might not be anymore, but they were playing overseas. They're playing in Germany, so
yeah, that's cool.
Maybe that's Jared's route. Maybe that's another guy. Maybe eventually it's somebody's route, but it's just the numbers are crazy here, guys. I mean, he's gonna pass 2 guys that went to the pros. That's a given. He'll probably get some type of invite to something. All these guys have gotten invites to little pro camps, but he could get something bigger. So Davis is right. An invite to the combine is something special, and I think that only then would he's getting drafted. I think no combine, no draft, which doesn't mean no pros, but an invite to the combine is huge. That's a big deal.
Even if he's one of those, like right after the draft, UDFAs, like undrafted free agent, immediately someone scoops him up, that's a good sign because he was at least on someone's board. You can assume that if he just barely scraped it off, he might have been one of those final guys where at the end of the 7th, someone was like, I want to get this dude, but he wasn't there. Their pick wasn't there. There's no point to trade up if you can sign him. So I'm excited to see this because it'll probably be pandemonium on campus if we're in a position where a player can get drafted. It'd be awesome. I've never been in a process like that, and especially at a small school, that's a big deal.
When you gotta think Cecil's the last one, and that's like 09, 08. I don't know exactly what year he was, but, he was the last guy to get into the league, and obviously very exciting that he was there in general. And Tom Lally played a couple preseason games, but it would be amazing to just say I watched him for 4 years. We're the same age. He's been incredible. He's played so well. He's a great personality. By everything we've heard, amazing teammate, hard worker. For him to come in here, do an interview with us, and just break down footwork, foot speed, what he did in the off. He's not talking about video games. He's not talking about, best dressed on the. He came in here and broke it down, what he did over the summer, how good he is, how good the team is. The guy's just he's on campus. He's a great guy, and that's the kind of guy you want the best for. Jay Hill, I think everybody on campus loves the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. When you have high character and everyone respects you, you can only want the best for someone like that. So it's definitely cool to see this type of success at a small school like this, because it doesn't come around often. And so I'm glad that we were able to cover Justin Hill a little bit more, because for a lot of people, they don't know him like people on campus know him, or they don't see him like people on campus see him.
Right.
So it's definitely important to let his presence be known to the public.
Yeah.
Moving on, we are going to talk about the Otterbein game a little bit. Mount Union defeated Otterbein 58-0 at home. Fulford was only in for a little bit. He was subbed out. We saw Braxton Plunk come in, but he threw 13 of 15 for 303 yards and 4 touchdowns. Petroselli finally made it back over 100 yards with a 112-yard, 2-touchdown performance. What did you see from Petroselli, Billy, this week that you didn't see maybe the week or two before, where he struggled to hit that 100-yard mark?
Yeah, I thought we got to start. You said Fulford kind of got pulled. He had 222 after the first quarter, so it was clear.
Yeah, he didn't get pulled. It was like we were up so much, the backups came in, that type of deal.
Well, I was wondering that, and I also wondered maybe they pulled him so quick, right, and gave Braxton Plunk a full drive. Maybe they did it like a scenario, like if needed. Here, go. We're still, it's still a game. You got to score.
Yeah.
At first quarter. Yeah, I don't know what it was with Petro. I just thought maybe at John Carroll they wanted to hit the pass game a little bit harder. And Josh is an exceptional running back, another great guy to talk to on campus. The receiving corps special. That's just what it is, guys. Ernie Burks is an absolute athlete. He plays any position you want. He's slot receiver, punt returner.
He's the scat back.
Yeah.
He's the do everything, yeah.
Yeah, and it's weird because some of these rosters just list athlete. They just put athlete on there, so we could probably put that for him. Wayne Ruby Jr. has terrific hands and really good size. He didn't get many throws. I think he probably makes a catch a game. And DJ Harvey gets better every game. This week, he caught a ball up high and got leveled and came down and jumped right up with the ball. It was amazing. He is a big body, but his route running is incredible. You wouldn't think he'd be as fast as he is, but he's been entertaining.
Underestimate the big boys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, there it is. I feel like he could play tight end. I feel like he could play O-line. He's maybe not O-line. He's not that big, but
if he bulked up,
sure,
maybe,
he can try.
Maybe a tackle.
He's just good sized receiver. And then we talked about Jay Hill, man. He's the center of it. There's been games where he hasn't gotten the ball at first, and they've struggled. The BW game, they go 2 drives without getting him the ball, 2 drives without scoring. So this game, Otterbein, first play of the game, guys, a 10-yard out route, perfect hook, caught it, first down. They ran that play 3 more times with 3 different guys. Worked. The receiving corps is insane.
See, I wasn't able to watch that game. I was kind of sick this weekend, but the receiving corps, I think, is the key to the offense this year. Last year it was Petroselli. When Petroselli got moving, you couldn't stop Mount Union.
Right.
This year it's probably the wide receiving corps that is the key to making the offense move. Besides the offensive line, those guys don't get enough love. We've got a very talented offensive line.
I agree.
Let's talk a little bit about the rest of the OAC. So after a really rough start to this season and a really questionable loss to Wilmington, Ohio Northern is back in contention in the OAC. They're listed as number 2 in the OAC. They're 3-2 overall, 3-1 in the conference. Do you think Ohio Northern might have a shot at this top 2, top 3 in the OAC, or is this a season where they've had an easy schedule to start out in the OAC? Are they going to run into some trouble the second half of the season?
Yeah, I'd say that might run into some trouble. they've played some good games, like you said, and come back, and you're hoping, obviously they come in with a fight for the Raiders and other teams, but I noted their struggles on offense, and any team in the OAC that isn't putting up good numbers on offense isn't going to be able to do it versus the top OAC team. So what happened against the Raiders, but Baldwin Wallace averaged 444 yards a game. They looked really good. And John Carroll just has a good enough defense that they'll get their credit as maybe the number 2. But a lot of teams really are struggling, guys, with playmakers on offense. They really are. Running backs have just not been as good as a lot of teams usually ride their running backs hard, and then we see we've seen more quarterback competitions than ever at OAC Media Day. We just time after time heard different quarterback competitions. We're giving this guy a chance, this guy a shot. We'll see, this guy's a sophomore or junior. So, just I think the stability is so key, and I think that's why Coach Finati went with Jake Floria, because I think he'd rather just be like, Jake Floria got time last year. I don't want to deal with a whole kid that I have no idea what he's going to be like in a game. I'll take Jake's faults and positives in a game, and I know he's got them. So I think a lot of teams are still trying to find their way offensively right now.
I'm really excited to see this race for number 2, 3, 4 in the OAC, though,
right,
because outside of Mount Union, this division is really close. Like, Heidelberg only lost by 1 point to
right,
Baldwin Wallace, and like we were high on Baldwin Wallace, still pretty high on Baldwin Wallace to finish second in the OAC, and it's like, if Heidelberg only lost by 1 point, how close are they?
Well, 2 years ago, the same thing happened. The entire OAC beat each other up. Nobody made the playoffs, and the next best team after the Raiders were 6-4, and that was the year John Carroll came off the win, and they went 4-6. So everybody was beating each other up, and it just kind of happened, so competitive. And you might see that happen again, Riley. There might be it might go 6 Raiders, and then a team that's 6-4, 5-5, and below. But Baldwin Wallace and John Carroll, I think that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch as far as who's kind of taking what ranking.
Oh, I agree. And I kind of agree with your point that the OAC could beat each other up and Mount Union could be the only team in the playoff this year. In the OAC, no other team is ranked in the top 25 of the country besides Mount Union and John Carroll. That's it. So if John Carroll loses 1 or 2 games to other OAC teams and then other OAC teams continue to beat each other, we probably won't have any top 25 team outside of Mount Union. And if we do, it's going to be a 2 or 3 loss team right towards the bottom of the 20s.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the OAC is criminally underrated or if we just beat each other so much that we kind of ruin the stock of our conference. It's definitely a dogfight at the moment.
I'll say this: you don't want to lose 2 games. It's killer.
Yeah.
You're on the bubble, and then they really look at what games you lost. And just for John Carroll, you got to finish out with all your wins, and maybe you're on the road, but you're in the playoff.
Yeah, I think John Carroll has the potential to make the playoff as long as they don't allow this conference to cannibalize them. Same thing with Baldwin Wallace. Baldwin Wallace could be right there at a fringe playoff too, as long as they don't lose any more games, or even if they lose one more game, they just can't allow this conference to cannibalize itself, because that's not good for a conference. You want to see 1, 2, maybe potentially 3 teams from the OAC to make the playoff, because a lot of people argue that outside of Mount Union, this conference isn't strong. But if you watch football here, you know that this has to be one of the best conferences in Division III football. The quality of the football games is too good for our teams to not make the playoff.
If you want to look at it as a Division I standpoint, you look at the SEC, it's probably the same thing with Alabama, Georgia, LSU. You can throw Florida in there, I guess. But I think Florida, a good comparison with Florida is John Carroll, though. I mean, Florida's defense is really good. John Carroll's defense is really good.
Yeah.
They're both very stagnant on offense, though. I mean, when they have the ball in their hands, they can't really move it, so...
Yeah, and like you said, Davis, did you ever feel like Michigan State would beat Ohio State? Probably not, but they put up the best fight, and they're probably maybe still top 3 in the Big Ten. I've heard a lot of good things about Penn State and that matchup coming up, but
I'm excited.
They're pretty good.
I think I'm going to that game. I'm excited.
Really?
Yeah.
Ooh,
it's a good trip.
That'd be fun. Definitely something we need to talk about on the podcast the next time. That'd be cool.
The Davis Robey experience.
So, we're going to look outside of the OAC now. Mary Hardin-Baylor, we talked about them earlier this season. They had a really close game against Belhaven University in week 2 or week 3. They only won 23-13, which is out of the ordinary for Mary Hardin-Baylor. But since that game, they've won 65-0 and 79-0. On top of that, their biggest challenger of the season, Hardin-Simmons, lost 38-27 to unranked Texas Lutheran. Is it just a cakewalk for Mary Hardin-Baylor to the playoffs at this point? I mean, they've been through their toughest test, 23-10. They creamed their last 2 opponents, and now their biggest matchup going into the season just lost to an unranked team by more than 10 points.
Yeah, it seems like they're going to, like you said, just have a nice season to finish out and get to the playoff. You don't want to talk about them on air too much. Like me personally, we don't like to bring it up and Mary Hardin-Baylor because, I mean, that's 4 playoff games before they even reach them, and then Mary Hardin-Baylor. But we just had to bring it up. We were like, where's Mary Hardin-Baylor? Where are they at? They're not, because it was when we mentioned that fans just didn't know the Raiders aren't 1. They're number 2. Mary Hardin-Baylor's 1. They're cruising. They look
are
good.
The number 1 team in the football country.
Yes.
And it's a coaches poll at the moment. So the coaches poll handedly has them as the number 1 team in the country.
And they're really good. We were familiar with Luke Portman. He's the backup quarterback there, and I read the stats from their last game. He entered for 3 passes. Guys, he had 115 yards. They're just blowing teams away, and they're a defensive team. That's what's killer, is they're all defense. And the Raiders, we talked about their O-line. They're going to have to get ready. They got pushed around a little bit last year. I think they're motivated, of course. We bring every guy in here, talk about Mary Hardin-Baylor a little bit, and they're like, we want to see him again. We want to play him again. And it'll be a test for sure. That defense was incredible. That front line is just too much. Too much. And you guys, we learned from D1, from any conference, the more you win, the better your recruiting gets. So
yes, that's true.
You win your second in 4 years, you're going to get another huge recruiting class, a bigger recruiting class. And not saying the Raiders don't. They'll always get, the boys and the guys that play so well and the guys that do so well. But we got to realistically think that this is a matchup now. This isn't Mary Hardin-Baylor got us once and it's a back and forth. No, this is the number 1 team that continually gets better.
They've established themselves as a powerhouse in NCAA Division III. I mean, hand in hand, you look at programs that are historically better than most other programs. Wisconsin Whitewater, University of Mount Union, Oshkosh, I guess, can probably be in there because they're decently competitive most of the time. Yeah. Semifinals. Mary Hardin-Baylor has entered the discussion. They are in there. They are an established program now, and they keep getting better. Like you said, 2 in the past 4 years, it's not going to slow down. Everyone thought Alabama was a flash in the pan, and here they are. So they're a team that is going to consistently be in the discussion, and even though it might not, we're not going to talk about them all the time, they are appropriate to talk about because they're the number 1 team in the country, and they're probably going to stay in that conversation. Looking forward, we're going to look at how the top 25 has changed because a lot of stuff happened since our last episode. North Central, which was ranked number 5, was upset by Wheaton, which was number 9 at the time. North Central is now number 12, and Wheaton jumped up to number 6. Muhlenberg, which was on the outside of the top 5 looking in, they were number 7. They're number 5 after beating Franklin and Marshall 49-6. And the final point is, yay, Ohio. Case Western Reserve is ranked number 21. Are you surprised that Case Western Reserve is a top 25 ranked team nationally in Division III football? Or
no, and I think especially after the way that John Carroll got ranked at 9 when they played us, I just think you're competitive within it. They'll note that, and you get ranked. These names are huge, Riley. These are guys, and I know me and Davis actually had talked about this. You got to learn these names early because these are the teams you could see as they drop and shift and come up and down. These are second, third round teams for the Raiders. I'd never heard of Muhlenberg. I wish I'd keyed in on them and that they'd, a top 5 team drops to 12, and all of a sudden you're playing a top 5 team in round 2 instead of round the semifinal or something like that. These are things to note, and it seems like the top 25 is beating each other up and getting after each other a little bit. But we know that happens. It happens in Division I. So I'm interested to see kind of which way it turns for the Ohio schools. I mean, John Carroll is such an interesting storyline because do they just revamp and go? I think that's huge.
I definitely think it's good for Ohio to have a ton of teams there in the top 25. And you mentioned before the show, this is one of the first years that Ohio has a chance to win all three divisions of National Football Championships in a while.
Yeah.
There's Ohio State, who's in firm contention for a playoff spot this year, I'd say. As long as they don't lose a game, they're in.
Mm-hmm.
You look at, what was it, Ohio Wesleyan?
I believe it's Ohio Wesleyan is the top D2 team.
Ohio Wesleyan in Division II, and then in Division III, Mount Union. And the last time this happened was 2014, correct?
Right. Buckeyes, Wesleyan, and Raiders all won a national title.
And so this is something that we could be looking at again. That's why we want to mention, yay, Ohio. There's a lot of football here. This is probably one of the biggest football states, whether people acknowledge it or not. Davis, you've seen football all over the state of Ohio. It's kind of like a living, breathing tradition, is it not?
Yeah, it is. I'm not from the Cleveland area. I'm from Cincinnati, and high school football in Cincinnati is very competitive. I mean, You have St. Xavier, you have Muller High School, you have Coleraine High School, you have Elder. I mean, there's great football in Southwest Ohio. There's great football in Northwest Ohio, Central, Southeast, and Northeast. And I actually want to touch up on Susquehanna real quick because they're actually ranked now.
Yeah, I did see that.
And when we did our first podcast, we talked about them beating John Hopkins.
Yeah,
they immediately went from John Hopkins and played Muhlenberg the next week, which is a top 5 team now. Mm-hmm. Lost to them in overtime by 7 points. So
and they actually moved up in rankings after they lost, correct?
Yeah, so they're now 4-1 on the season, and I'm not sure about these other teams that they play, but for right now, it looks like this Susquehanna team's a little bit better. I mean, you were like, I don't know who Susquehanna is. I don't even know how to pronounce their
I
university.
thought I recognized the name from the playoffs, whether it was last year or year before, because we did look at last year when we were doing the 2018 playoff brackets.
I don't think they made it last year.
Might have been 2017.
Yeah, probably.
But that's definitely a team to look at. If they beat Johns Hopkins, who was a semifinals team last year,
that played Mount Union,
and then took Muhlenberg to the wire, imagine how much they would have jumped if they beat Muhlenberg. Because what are they?
They'd probably be a top 15 or 10
right,
team.
I'd put them top 20 at least at that point.
That's crazy. Some final things to look at. So St. Thomas football from Minnesota, they were recently kicked out of their conference. Their Division III team. They were kicked out of their conference for quote unquote winning too much, and they've been extended an offer by the NCAA to go Division I. What are your thoughts on this, guys?
I personally, I think it's unfair they got kicked out.
Yeah, I agree.
And if you're not familiar, the Raiders just saw St. Thomas 5 years ago in the championship. Unfair to get kicked out, first off. And I am personally not a believer in moving up divisions. Just because locally Malone had their problems and eventually their football team got disbanded, moving from D3 to D2. It just worries me a little bit. You talked about they can do scholarships now, larger scholarships and whatnot, but
they are a bigger D3 school too. It said that they have about 6,200 local students. It's just regional and local students.
That's about almost 3 times the size of here.
Yeah, it's pretty big. And so they've discussed, is this not this football team, but this school's sports athletics, their programs, able to go D1. And normally the rule is that you can't jump more than one division. So let's say you're Division III, you have to go straight to Division II. And it was said that they have men's and women's hockey teams that are very good, and they cannot compete for national championships because the Division II level does not host hockey national championships. And so that creates this once-in-a-lifetime type thing where they can jump straight from D3 to D1. But like you said, it could be an absolute disaster because we saw it with Malone. What if Malone struggled jumping from D3 to D2? What's going to happen to a school that jumps from D3 to D1?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to compete in D1 no matter what you're working at, guys. And you think benefits, yeah, maybe you could get to like where Buffalo is, produce a couple pro talents and work from there. But maybe you're Ohio University where you struggle year after year and only get good years every 5 or 6. But I don't know. I mean, like you said too, Riley, it sounds like that's the chance of a lifetime for a program.
It is.
Personally, I think it would be different if if it's FBS or FCS.
It would probably be on the championship subdivision
That's what I was
level.
thinking.
Yeah.
So I think if you compare it to that, obviously you have dominant teams there, North Dakota State, Sam Houston State. I mean, you've got notable teams there.
James Madison.
James Madison's always a powerhouse. Yeah. You see those teams go into FBS schools. Like, I remember James Madison beat Virginia Tech. That was a big upset in 2012 or 13 or something like that. But North Dakota State consistently goes to D1 schools and handily beats them. I mean, I remember when North Dakota State beat a ranked Iowa team in Iowa.
I can't remember who South Dakota State played this year too, but South Dakota State also almost won a Division I football game
Howard
against FBS.
Howard last year played UNLV 48-point underdogs and ended up winning the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's technically by the line stat, the biggest upset in NCAA history. But if you really want to look at a game that is historically known for an FCS team beating an FBS team, is Appalachian State and Michigan.
Yeah.
When Michigan was ranked in the top 25, I think we were a top 10 team, actually.
Yeah, I think they were. It was, 2007?
Yeah, and Appalachian State came into the big house. They had turnovers, but they had players that never gave up and always kept going. They were actually down pretty big in the fourth quarter, came back, and ended up winning the game on a blocked field goal. So I think there's a potential for St. Thomas to, build up a program in FCS and eventually even make the jump to FBS, because we've seen teams like Liberty and Charlotte in the past couple of years make this jump to FBS football. And
Georgia Southern, too. Yeah.
I mean, they may not be successful at first, but it'll always take some time, and that's just how football programs are. I mean, you're not going to be really bad and then instantly be fantastic the next year.
Yeah, and I made a mistake, Riley. I just looked it up. It's Notre Dame College is
Notre Dame College, yeah.
They're making waves. They're not necessarily they're top 25 right now, but they were making waves that people were talking if they get in the playoffs and get a little bit better. But I don't know if we have a chance for 3 Ohio championships, but I just want to make sure. Wesleyan's not even ranked, so I didn't want to steer
You never
the
know.
wrong
Isn't
way.
Tiffin pretty decent this year, too, at football?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
they
you
also
never
made
know.
some waves.
There's just some good Ohio teams everywhere. You're hard pressed to find a really bad Ohio football team.
Would you ever think Mount Union could make a jump to D2?
I people ask that all the time.
Yeah,
Why don't you guys move up? Just from what I've been told, just talking with people over the years, it's a trenches thing. It's a size thing. You put some pros out there, guys, but we're talking about O linemen that are just bigger, just D linemen that are bigger. Our skill position guys, I think, still put up a great look at it, because we get guys from Akron and Ashland and D1 schools, but in the trenches, that's where the games, I think, a team like Ohio State, like, we're talking about whole different animals on both sides of the ball. I don't know that, if you're struggling to get sacks versus Otterbein, how are you going to get it versus the Ohio State offensive line?
Yeah, you look at the Division I, even at FBS, FCS level, those are people that, they're skilled, but they might not always be as skilled as D3 players. It's their size. That's where the prototypical size comes in. And then when the people are able to refine skill and size, that's when you see them go to the NFL. So you pointed out, it's Division III, we might have really skilled athletes, but they'll probably never have the size that Division I has.
And again, you're getting sorted down, right? Mm-hmm. So you're sorting down. You're saying now we're finding good players, better, and then you're at the pros and the best. So, D3 to D2 or D1, they're sorted for a reason. You're at a D2 school instead of a D3 for a reason, and obviously being at a D3 school, I don't discredit anything that any athlete does here. It's extremely competitive, and a lot of these guys could play D1, I bet, but again, we're classified at this level, we play this level, and we dominate at this level. We do well, but we run a good program, and I think a move up is just not something a lot of schools consider, because they're happy running things the way they do. I think we're just talking about that kind of change because they're in such a special situation, guys. They got booted from their conference. Mm-hmm. Probably shouldn't have happened. I don't know.
Absolutely not.
I don't know their winning compared to ours, but it probably should not have happened.
It's not more than Mount Union, and they've lost games in their conference in recent years. Like they typically lose like one game in their conference every other year or something like that, which I don't think is grounds for getting booted out. That and most schools, like you said, it's just not in their best interest, especially in other sports, to move up in a division. Like people ask Mount Union all the time, why don't you move up in a division? Well, yeah, it might be okay for a football team eventually, but what about our basketball team and our track team? And it's just not fair at that point.
You're still talking about like everything in general. Why doesn't Ohio State why don't they go straight play the Browns? You're just saying, hey, this is where you're classified. And people ask me, is it annoying to watch the Raiders win? I'm like, is it annoying to watch Ohio State win every week? No, it's good football. It's still, there's athletes on other teams you enjoy watching, good players. Nebraska, Ohio State beat them up pretty good, but they had a couple defensive players that I enjoyed watching try and play these guys, and it's like, that's just what it is. I like watching other players on teams, even if we're beating up on them. Brandon Paschal for Otterbein, it was a great matchup. He took on the entire Raider offense. He was tackling Petroselli. Jay Hill beat him a couple times, and he answered. Jordan Johnson for Baldwin Wallace was awesome. He was a great corner, and it was a great matchup. It's just good football. You're watching, if you watch the Steelers play the Dolphins, you're like, or let's say the Patriots play the Dolphins, you're like, okay, the Patriots are going to beat them up. Well, all right, but look, what's Rosen doing? What's Rosen's progress? Kenyon Drake's still one of my favorite players. Like, it's just good. You're watching competitive football. That's what it is. It's competition at the end of the day.
And it might not even be like just on the other team. It could be your own team. Getting backups in, getting the second or third, even third strings reps. I mean, when Tom Brady was out and then Garoppolo came in, Garoppolo went out, and then Jacoby Brissett. I mean, you have to look at your team and say, who's the next guy up?
Yeah, that team had 3 NFL starters. That's a good point.
Yeah.
And all of them could start for almost any team.
And we watch for when teams go down a lot, they're running the same offense, right? Their same game plan because, hey, did it work versus the Raiders in the second quarter? Yeah, then it'll probably work versus BW in the opening drive, So they say the Raiders have a really good defense. We run, let's say, the quadruple option. That's their offense. They want to try it. They run it all game versus the Raiders. The Raiders, but it works. And, they run it only in the third quarter after getting beat up, but they run it and it works. They're like, wow, this might work next week. They run the same offense, so they really know, the Raiders, they didn't let any run up to the right side on the inside. We don't block well at all. They're not going to do it next week. They're still going to try things. And that's important for a program to still get that experience and to feel like this is what we did versus the top dog.
All right, we've got one more story after this, one more small tidbit. Davis, you actually dug this one up, so I'm going to let Davis cover this. Davis, tell us about Grinnell College.
Yeah, so Grinnell College is a Division III football team that had a total of 38 players on their team, 8 people on their coaching staff. So what ended up happening was through the first couple games, people started getting injured. They weren't going to recover in time. In total, they had 11 guys just get absolutely plastered with injuries. And so the college ultimately decided that they were just going to forfeit the rest of the season. And that leaves, from 38 to 11, that leaves 27 guys. And you have to have at least 24, 25 people field a team.
Yeah, because you've got 11 on both sides of the ball and then special teams units. So,
and that means a lot of guys are playing both ways. It could cause even more injuries, hurt someone's career. They're at this level because they love to play football. And I understand that if they get injured, that could be their career. So, and it wasn't even just the school deciding, it was even a player vote. The players voted on if they wanted to keep playing on the season or not. And they decided ultimately just to not because they didn't want to risk anything. And I think if they rebound for next year, then that'll ultimately be the best decision for them. And, the players did what they wanted to do.
An interesting story. I mean, there's just not too much to add there. I don't know how they started I don't know who polices it or how they just in-house wanted to do it, but you can't start a year with 38. No. That's not smart because at least 22 is getting meaningful time on both sides of the ball. That's
It's like
not
a
good.
JV high school football team.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like you
really.
can have a high school football team with 38, but when you're in college, it's like a high school football team. There are kids that do play both sides of the ball.
I was wondering if they try that. 38's low. I mean, I can't put enough emphasis on how low that is.
There's not too many two-way players in Division. I don't know if there's any two-way players in Division I football.
There shouldn't be. That's
No,
that's the
there
point we
shouldn't
got to
be.
make
In
too.
college football, there should not be
the
two-way players.
the
Right.
last guy Division I wise that got publicly recognized for being two-way is Jabril Peppers.
Right.
And the only defensive player to ever win an Heisman Trophy was Desmond Howard. And guess what? He played both ways. So, I don't know. It's hard to say like how many people can actually play two ways at a good. I think corners and wide receivers. They
There was
match
a
up
guy
pretty
from
well.
Michigan State that played two ways a few years ago too. I can't remember his name though. He didn't really make it to the NFL. Like I think he got drafted, but he wasn't good.
And that just goes to attest that if you play both ways, you better be pretty good at playing both ways, or else you're not going to go anywhere. And then coaches are going to say, hey, you're good at this, but you're not good at that, so you're just going to stick doing this.
Yeah, that's too low. Too low of a roster number. They kind of set themselves up, it sounds like.
It's definitely
You
sad
got to
though.
predict 8 or 9 injuries during the year to guys. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Maybe it was the players. Maybe the players like thought that they wanted to play, and then by the end of it, they just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I think that's why Mount Union recruits so heavily. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't know who's going out or who's coming in. We always have a bunch of people come in, freshmen, every single year. And that's just how it is. I mean, if you recruit like that, you're always going to find people that are going to put in the work, and you're going to find people that aren't, and they're just going to quit. So it's definitely, it's probably definitely more of a recruiting thing than anything else.
I agree. Well, that's really all we have for the show today. Thank you guys for coming on, and Davis, I always have a great time doing with you, Billy.
Yes, sir.
A great time having you. Make sure that you stay tuned this weekend, 91.1 WRMU, Purple Raiders, Billy Beebee. He's the voice of Mount Union.
Got a 3-hour
Hey.
car ride.
Hey, have fun. That's the drive I take every time I go home.
I gotta respect it. I don't know.
Who are the Purple Raiders playing this weekend?
Wilmington. We're at Wilmington, so and then fellas, we got 2 straight home games coming
I
up.
know.
With
Excited.
homecoming leading off on the 19th. So
Capital, right?
Capital's one of them, and I think Ohio Northern after that. So
It'll be some good.
some great games coming up. Unfortunately, it looks like Capital is going through the same struggles that Otterbein is, so
Yeah.
it might be a similar kind of game. However, best place to listen, 91.1 WRMU.
I agree. Everyone stay tuned. Have a great weekend. Like he said, 91.1 WRMU this weekend. Going to be at Wilmington. Thank you for listening, and stay safe. Have a good one, Purple Raiders.
See ya.